Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, April 20th, 2024, and today we're going to be talking about Speaker Mike Johnson and the possibility of his removal through a motion to vacate as the House of Representatives passes foreign aid related to Ukraine and Israel. Now, Mike Johnson has been under fire by Republicans for the past couple of months ever since he got the House speakership. Back in October when he was first elected, there was a lot of conversation around how long Mike Johnson would actually last, considering that Kevin McCarthy was elected into January of 2023, and then months later was ousted from the House speakership. It came into question, genuinely speaking, does Mike Johnson last as long as Kevin McCarthy did? And so far, it's looking good, but not perfect. Most recently, we've seen more and more enthusiasm on the Republican side to oust Mike Johnson. Initially, it was just a few right-wing, extremists in the party that were very much seen as such. Many Republicans had written off their claims, saying that this was unnecessary, that this was only giving Democrats ammunition against the Republican Party, and pretty much voting against any idea and not really considering anything related to Mike Johnson's removal. Now, what's interesting enough is that it doesn't take that many Republicans to oust a House Speaker. If we remember back in January of 2023 when Kevin McCarthy was being elected the Speaker of the House, it went through so many continuous votes because Democrats were unwilling to vote for Kevin McCarthy. And that makes sense. Democrats rarely ever are in this position where they would want to vote for a Republican, and in the case of Mike Johnson, they didn't vote for him either. It took Republicans doing many coalitions, fielding many different speaker opportunities, and pretty much coming down to relatively the least controversial candidate, which at the time was Mike Johnson, who went on, of course, now to become the Speaker. But given where we are, Democrats are in a very interesting position when it comes down to Mike Johnson. With this momentum building up to oust him from the House, Democrats have to evaluate this not only from an internal working lens, but also an electoral lens. Some Democrats have already come out publicly and said they would vote to save Mike Johnson's speakership. But the question is, how many Democrats would actually vote to save his speakership? Because many Democrats are making this contingent on whether or not Mike Johnson or the Republican Party gives them committees, gives them different opportunities to maintain even more power in the House of Representatives. Democrats are using this as a bargaining tool because they know if they are the ones to bail out Mike Johnson, they will have to return to their districts and explain that to their constituents. And just generally speaking, it doesn't make much electoral sense for Democrats to save him in the first place. But the fact that this is even being brought back up into consideration just goes to show just how out of touch the House GOP is with the rest of the American electorate. The House Republican Party that voted to oust Kevin McCarthy and went through multiple rounds of voting for a new House Speaker in October of 2023 didn't realize just how much damage this did to the Republican brand, especially House Republicans. Many voters across the country, especially following the Speaker debacles in January and October, view the Republican Party more negatively, view it as something that simply cannot work together. It's not the well-oiled machine that we've seen Democrats have when they had a very slim, in fact, the exact amount of seats that Republicans have today, a very slim majority with 222 seats in the House. And so when I look at, the most recent House elections, when it comes down to Speaker here, Mike Johnson really does not have that much room for failure, does not have that much room for dissent from Republicans as they build up this motion here to remove Mike Johnson. Now, he might be very much reliant on Democrats. I think this article here saying that some Democrats would vote to save Johnson's speakership, and given how many Republicans voted against the aid in Ukraine here, I think it would be interesting to see. Interesting to see how many of these Republicans that, again, voted against the aid also decide to either keep Mike Johnson or decide to oust him, because it really doesn't take that many. But eventually, it might have significantly more than many, right? When Kevin McCarthy was on his way out, I think a lot of people saw not only the benefit of what he had known from leadership in the Republican Party, pretty much what he had based his entire candidacy on for Speaker here, but Kevin McCarthy was also an electoral juggernaut. He was able to fundraise for candidates like no other Republican in the House. He was able to make a major name for himself, amongst Republicans, amongst Democrats, amongst independents. He was a well-known, well-established figure. I would say arguably the Nancy Pelosi of the Republican Party. And I'm not just saying that because he was House Speaker. He is probably one of the most visible House Republicans, with maybe the exception of people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who get in the news more often because they do more newsworthy things, in a sense, to put it lightly. But what we are finding here is that Mike Johnson is different. And so I don't think there's as much of an added electoral benefit here, at least when it comes down to boosting Republicans by keeping Mike Johnson. But I do think a considerable portion, roughly 90% at least, of these House Republicans will vote to maintain Mike Johnson because it is overall a very bad look. I think my initial reaction when I first saw this article was, how in the world is this happening again? And we remember that when it did happen, it was not a good look. And it started off small. It started off with 1 or 2 House Republicans. Then it became 3, the third that just announced yesterday that they were backing a move to get rid of Mike Johnson. If Democrats were to vote down party lines as they did in January and October, it would take exactly 5 Republicans in the House to motion for a removal of Mike Johnson and vote on said removal alongside Democrats, and Mike Johnson would be removed. It would not take a lot. Republicans are not in the most powerful position based on where they are today. Democrats are in a much better position. Democrats know that Republicans too are going to look at this and say, you know what, we want Mike Johnson to stay. And Democrats might look at that and say, you know what, we don't, simply because it would hurt you. Mike Johnson right now is, again, this very, very much unproblematic and largely inconsequential House Speaker. I don't think he'll go down in history as one of the most notable, one of the most recognizable. I think he is very much an interim into what happens in the next upcoming election here. But I think Republicans are going to recognize that this is a very bad look. But quite frankly, I don't think some of these more extreme Republicans care, because they didn't care back in 2023 when they made that motion in October. They didn't care when they held out for the longest speakership vote since the 1800s for the House of Representatives, the longest speakership vote since the 1800s, mid-1800s at that, being in January of this past year. Evidently, some of these Republicans do not care. But there are very real electoral repercussions when motions like these are made and sometimes passed. Because on the generic ballot front, Democrats can only go up from here. Republicans are at roughly 46%, and honestly speaking, that's what I expect them to get this coming November, maybe 47 or 48% at max. But the Democrats have a lot of room for growth. And based on these numbers, and based on what's happening on the national front, should this continue to be a major problem for the GOP, should this continue to be a notable part of the mainstream Republican Party, this is not a good look, and there is no other way to cut it. And it isn't just the generic congressional vote here that I think we're going to see a shift. It is the outcome of a shift in the generic congressional vote that should terrify Republicans. Because back in 2022, Republicans were expected to get a 2.5% lead over Democrats. They ended up outperforming that at 2.8%. But with just 2.8%, with that 2.8%, which was a swing from 2020, we can take a look here of 8 points. What was, Democrats actually just 3, so that's about 6 points from 2018, significantly more. Democrats plus 8, Republicans plus 3, that's an 11-point swing from 2018. You are seeing monumental shifts resulting in a House pickup of just 10 seats. Just 10 seats. And when you go down the list of the districts that Democrats were expected to win easily, you don't see any Republican flips. When it comes down to the list of districts that Democrats should have been able to win narrowly, you don't see any Republican flips. And when it comes down to the most competitive districts and Republicans expected to win narrowly districts, you have some Democratic pickups on one side and a crap ton on the other. And not just pickups, maintaining competitive seats. Districts like Colorado's 8th, or Connecticut's 5th, or Illinois' 17th. You have here competitive districts where Democrats were able to win because of the generic ballot, because they did major improvements compared to what was expected of them, and that's because the Republicans at the time did a very bad thing for their public perception on the issue of abortion, but it mattered. This time around, that matters, and so does the national perception of the GOP. As more and more articles like this release, and an increased possibility that he actually is ousted as House Speaker 7 months out from the election. It is a very, very bad look. But for some of these Republicans, they simply do not care. And when you think about who wouldn't care about issues like this one, you have people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who genuinely believe that he needs to go. I mean, you have an issue here where Marjorie Taylor Greene is discussing moving ahead with the motion to vacate, deciding here that she might herself take it upon her to remove him from the speakership. And when you take a look, too, at what districts some of these Republicans represent, for instance, Marjorie Taylor Greene in Georgia's 14th district, she won with 66% of the vote. This district here was not at all competitive, and Marjorie Taylor Greene won with 66%, which means no matter what she does, blue wave, red wave, no matter what the national composition is, national generic ballot is, in 99% of instances, Marjorie Taylor Greene will win her congressional seat. And there is nothing that Democrats, Republicans, Independents can do to change that. Because this is her seat, and this is a seat she's going to win. And so I think many of them are self-interested actors that are making a name for themselves by attacking Mike Johnson. They brag about breaking down Kevin McCarthy, someone who is a very strong fundraiser, advocate, collaborator, whatever you want to describe him as on the Republican side. Kevin McCarthy, though, no matter what you say, he was there with his electoral experience, with his leadership experience that I think to many was invaluable. But evidently to some did not matter enough. People like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who may have wavered on Kevin McCarthy, at one point was opposed and ultimately was not. That it was an initiative led by people very similar to her. But ultimately, this time, she doesn't like Mike Johnson. She doesn't like the aid being sent to Ukraine. She doesn't even like the aid being sent to Israel. She does not like the money being spent on international affairs. And so she will make this motion. And while it may not pass, not now at least, momentum is certainly rising. With 3 House Republicans backing the move to oust Mike Johnson, if Mike Johnson doesn't cut a deal with Democrats, which we've already seen some top Republicans say that they will never cut a deal with Democrats. Democrats offered Kevin McCarthy an opportunity to maintain his speakership if they just allowed the Democratic Party to do what they wanted to do in some portions of the House. They weren't asking for a complete and total takeover. Democrats know their limits on this. But they tried to do it with Kevin McCarthy and he rejected it, and something tells me Mike Johnson very well may as well. This is not always the best look, especially for the House Speaker, to be ceding anything to Democrats. And some Republicans, Kevin McCarthy included, would more rather lose their race and be ousted as House Speaker than ever compromise or work together with Democrats. And while that may be a problem that we can speak to on a larger scale at a later time, about polarization, about inefficiencies, about unwillingness to work with the other side of the aisle, all very valid things. Regardless, though, we're looking at this from a political lens. We're looking at this from an electoral politics lens. And none of it helps the GOP. And so if the generic ballot numbers here, by the time we reach November, were to improve, I think a lot of it would have to do with the perception of the House GOP and how they're performing now. Because voters are not pleased with them, but they want them and narrow them narrowly more than Republicans do than Democrats across the nation. What's interesting, though, is that of the most recent polls, almost all of them that have been taken in the end of March and in April show either Democrats ahead or a tie. The average still has Republicans up by 1.6%, but ultimately these races here have narrowed. The national support for Democrats and Republicans have narrowed, and it is a very fascinating election season to be watching this from the outside, to be watching this and looking at things like Mike Johnson, where should there be just a few more Republicans upset with him and him being unwilling to compromise with Democrats, which we have seen in the past, he may not have enough votes to save him, and we're back to another House Speaker vote. It will be fascinating to see if this ends up coming true. I think Republicans are going to realize that this is not the right choice, that it is way too close to a general election. It's not October of 2023. It is April of 2024. In 7 months from today, we will know who the next president of the United States will be. We will know likely who the next Speaker of the House of Representatives will be, the next majority leader of the United States Senate. There are so many different things at play here that I think when we see this happen, if Mike Johnson is to be removed, the expectation can absolutely be that this benefits the Democratic Party, because this already dysfunctional situation that has been set up has helped Democrats in special elections and helped them in 2022 and could very well help them again in this coming fall. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen is a video you can watch, and then a playlist for 2024 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.